Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network, and today's topic is wise hope, distinguished from blind optimism. Wise hope is informed by circumstance and often by the grief of existing circumstance, but is still engaged in focus on the possibilities of transformation. So should on this Independence Day, we get to talk about wise hope and what we might be manifesting for our future and the future of our country and the future of our world. All light topics. So before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your electrons, your molecules, and lighting you up with this brilliant beam of light coming from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and rub those palms together. Feel the friction and the temperature, the magnetism, the resistance, the buzzing, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning. It's great to be here with you. And on this Independence Day in the US. And I guess we get to look at what independence is. And maybe that's part of where this conversation about wise hope comes in. I'm listening to an audiobook called Still Hopeful by a 40+ year long activist named Maud Barlow, who is just a remarkable, remarkable woman. And in the face of activism, there are many, many deep setbacks and frustrations. It's very easy to get caught up in the ills of the world and the endless amount of work and transformation that is calling to be addressed. And she talks about what it is to be hopeful. And by the way, if you guys are putting in comments and I'm not responding, it's because I don't see them. So in order for me to see your comments, please go to the Enlightened World Network Facebook page or to the Enlightened World Network YouTube channel. And if you put your comments in there, then I will see them. Good morning, Veronica. Thank you so much for chiming in, and happy 4th of July to you too. And so that's hopefulness is what allows us to say happy 4th of July, right? Is Independence Day, and that we can be having an informed optimism. So it doesn't mean that everything is rosy or that we're pretending that our challenges don't exist, but it does mean that we can still be taking action. So in wise hope is something. Good morning, Jenny. So good to have you here with us this morning. Happy Independence Day to you too. We're talking about wise hope and how it's distinguished from blind optimism in that it's informed, it's aware of the challenges, it's aware of the grief that we might have around the things that aren't working, and yet it's not crippled by that grief. And so there was a wonderful quote from the woman who wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves that says, despair, I experience despair, but I don't set a place for it at my table. That's probably a misquote, but it's kind of close. And so when we look at grief versus despair, despair is kind of a giving up, and we may have those moments of stumbles and falls in our commitments to transformation and change. And I think, and then we get to metabolize that grief and move forward. So Veronica says, I found my son dead on February 29th, 2018. Will never be the same. Veronica, I just don't even know how to begin to express my sadness and grief for you. I can't even imagine what that might be. I have a new friend whose daughter died at the age of 17 a couple years ago, and they have dedicated their lives to honoring their daughter through all kinds of actions in the world. And this is a way that perhaps we can transform our grief into something that brings solace at the least, hopefully, and transformation and gift and hope and benefit to others on the other end of things. So Jenny says that happened to my daughter, lost her son 12, 8, 19, 6 months old, and she hasn't been the same either. Yes, I can understand. I mean, such profound grief. It's like a part of your heart gets torn up and torn away. And I was, good morning, Dido. So glad to have you here with us this morning. Welcome. So I was just recently speaking to an old friend who lost his 17-year-old brother-in-law very suddenly from a health issue that they never anticipated was going to culminate in his death. And we were talking about how just deep sorrow there is. So Veronica says this is a relentless road of pain every day. They say it gets better, but it gets worse. I think, Veronica, it does get worse until it gets better. And, to deal with that pain and that grief, I can't even fathom how deeply devastating that must be. And I imagine that if you can transform it, and it may just be too soon, but if you can transform it to a motivation for service of some sort, to be doing something in the world in the name of your son that is bigger than you, can be a gift that keeps him and his memory alive, and that is also a contribution to the world. That's what this friend of mine has done. Is one of the people I was talking about is dedicated their lives, really. Oh my gosh, Veronica, I'm so sorry. It sounds like it would be so good for you to get some counseling. Veronica says, I was all alone and went crazy, screaming uncontrollably. It sounds like the memory is very, very, very vivid for you. And 4 years later, or 4.5 years later, and to be living with that extreme of pain and suffering for that period of time, it sounds like what you're doing is you're replaying it in your mind over and over and over again. And what happens is that deepens the grief, and it just entrenches the experience and the pattern. And it sounds like it would probably be very supportive to you to find someone who can support you in maybe rewiring some of that, and to be present. Because what's happening, it sounds like, is that you are continuously reliving the trauma, and I can't even imagine it the first time, let alone the 1,000th time. So I really, really support you in finding some help to help you move out of that pattern that has now become so deeply entrenched, that pattern of anguish and pain. Nobody should have to suffer that for so long, and certainly your son wouldn't want that for you. Jenny says, being estranged from my daughter and 2 other grandchildren a year after losing the baby has caused me a lot of grief. My heart goes out to you, Veronica. Sounds like PTSD, indeed. And so, Veronica, I don't know if this would help, but so you might look into NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. It's very, very powerful techniques to be able to move beyond trauma. And I was talking to someone who had had a trauma around cutting themselves by mistake, but they kept seeing the blood flowing, and just were really traumatized by it over and over again. And when I was able to talk to them, they said that that they were seeing the blood everywhere over and over and over. And I asked them if it was in color. And so there's a bunch of things that you can do to help to shift the experience of this persisting memory. The fact it was in vivid color, the blood was flowing, it was red and vibrant. And I suggested, well, what happens if you make the image black and white in your mind? And that shifted the whole experience of it. So making it black and white, making it fuzzy, pushing it further away, running it backwards, putting a different soundtrack on it, seeing yourself in a movie theater watching the movie. So instead of seeing the replay again and again and again, imagine yourself up in the projection room, watching yourself in the theater, watching the movie. So you're not actually watching the movie over and over, you're watching yourself watching the movie. And that way you can get some distance from the experience. So Veronica says, can't help it. I had one-on-one therapy for grief for 2 years. it sounds like you still could use some more support, Veronica. I'm so sorry you're going through this. And Jenny says you have to come out of that replay trauma to heal. Yeah, you know, and to be dealing with any maybe underlying guilt and MDR, Jenny says that can work. And there's tapping technology, which can be really profound. NLP is different from traditional therapy. NLP deals with the mechanisms of the mind, neurolinguistic programming. And so, you know, the mechanism through which you're reliving this can be redirected and shifted so that you can hopefully get some relief. And Veronica says, you never know what shoes everyone is going through. Yes, it's true. Tapping is, that's what I was going to talk about, is tapping. So there's a website you might check out, Veronica, called The Tapping Solution. And it's tapping different meridian points to help relieve trauma. It's very, very powerful. Traditional therapy for grief, I think, is not as powerfully impactful. This is my opinion. This is not a medical opinion, not a medical advice, but as something like NLP or tapping. Jenny says you need soul healing. It sounds like, you know, there's just such a profoundly deep brokenheartedness. I understand that. And so one of the things that can be so healing for grief of any sort, despair of any sort, even though typically we feel really incapacitated and unable to take action, unable to step outside of ourselves, when we have something bigger than ourselves to put our attention on, that can make a profound difference. And so maybe setting up some kind of foundation in the name of your son, you know, doing some kind of volunteering to honor his memory instead of purely mourning his passing. You know, so there's on the other side of that grief is the possibility for using that experience to better the world and to maybe support others who have had a similar experience. You know, to try and go through something like that alone, I think it just makes things that much harder. And so we're talking about hopefulness and allowing our grief and despair to move us into a place of greater resolve. And Veronica says, I don't have too many friends and my husband is so mean. He called him a dead man, not his child. Says, what are you crying for? Either I don't know if I don't think you mean Benedict there, or migraines. It's so hard. I'm so sorry, Veronica. It sounds like you're suffering very, very, very deeply. And Jenny says it takes work to heal, little steps, practice daily to help yourself find peace. Yeah. Maybe, Veronica, you might connect with a meetup, possibly a grief meetup, where you can find other people to connect with that have gone through similar situations, and maybe find support with other people, because it sounds like you don't really have that at home. So yeah, they're digging ourselves out of the pit of grief is not an easy thing. It's a heroic challenge. And it takes a Herculean effort to reclaim our own lives. We can give ourselves over to grief and despair, and it's not that there aren't reasons for it. But oftentimes people hold on to their grief out of a belief on maybe an other than conscious level, that that's how they keep that person alive, is that by grieving them, by feeling sad, like that they don't have the right to be happy. By feeling sad, that's how we keep their memory alive. But the truth is, we can be keeping their memory alive through celebration as well. And it takes a profound act of will over and over and over and over again to move from that grief. So Jenny says, grief not addressed begins taking a toll on your body on a cellular level. The trauma is stored in the body, 100%. So this friend, and the friend that was telling me about the loss of their brother-in-law, that family had lost a child years and years and years previous. So they lost 2 children. And what they realized with the death of the second child is that they never dealt with the first death. And now they lived their whole lives out of that grief. Veronica says, my son Benedict was my only son and best friend, and he's gone. I'm so sorry, Veronica. And there are no words that are going to heal that for you. And it sounds like living life in a tribute to him would serve his memory. And all I can do is suggest that to you. I'm quite sure that as your best friend, he wouldn't want you to be lost in the devastation that you feel forever. I would imagine that he would want your joy for you, that he would want a full and fulfilling life for you. And I feel for your pain. And what I know about pain is that we can eventually, and again, it takes deliberate and conscious and persistent effort, but we can transform that pain into something that is service or that is providing hope. We can stay in despair, and then that is destroying ourselves as well, right? And so Jenny says, I recently saw a book called The Body Keeps Score. There are also YouTube videos worth checking out. It might help you. It's true. So, when we feel sorrow, I mean, you can think about it just on a mechanical kind of view, where what's happening is that there are all these chemicals that are being produced, hormones and balances, when we feel joy, when we feel sorrow, when we're in grief, when we're in anger. All of those things are different chemical sets in our bodies that set up different balances and imbalances. So Jenny says, trauma to triumph. Exactly. And it's the challenge of our lives. It's the challenge of our lives to move through the grief of loss, and to find a way to be able to use that ultimately as an enrichment. And it's not an easy transition. It's a transformation. It's not something that there's any fixed pathway for. You know, it takes deep committed will and choice, and it's not an even path. You know, we may move 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Sometimes it might be feel like it's 3 steps back, you know, but you can transform the most miraculous things. And this is the hopefulness. This is hopefulness. It's wise hope. Hopefulness born of experience. Hopefulness born of the metabolized grief. You know, so the distinction between grief and despair is just all consuming, and life denying. You know, it just absorbs the life force. It lays waste. Whereas grief is something that we can metabolize. We can experience that grief and transform it to wisdom and to possibility. Alchemize. That's really the best word, is that there's a I want to say holy alchemy that can occur in relation to grief as we allow it to deepen our experience and to deepen our compassion. And hopefulness is something that self-love, Jenny says, and I'm going to add self-forgiveness. You know, that we get to create this alchemy of deepened wisdom and strength. And the fact is that because Jenny and Veronica, because you guys have gone through these deep experiences of pain, you are in a unique place to be able to support others who also have had such depth of emotion, because there are many people who don't know how to be present to that kind of pain. And you guys, having experienced it, can be present to others that are going through such a thing. So that's it for this morning. And I just wish you ease. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I encourage you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, EWN One with the Earth, and Enlightened World Living. And Veronica, again, I just wish you ease and grace. So much love to you. And I hope to see you all here again really, really soon. Lots of love.